What a wild time to be a Leafs fan, because it honestly feels like every single day there's another rumor or another move that could completely change this team. I'm Victor, and today we've got two huge stories to break down. First, free agency could bring some intriguing new forwards to Toronto as John Shaika keeps looking for the right pieces to strengthen the lineup. Then we'll talk about the blockbuster speculation linking the Leafs to not one, but two former Norris Trophy winners as Toronto searches for a major upgrade on the blue line. If even one of these moves happens, this roster could look completely different by opening night. So let's get into it. And before we do, if you're enjoying the channel and want daily Maple Leafs coverage all off-season long, hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,500 subscribers. Your support really helps us keep growing, and I truly appreciate every one of you. When you look at where the Maple Leafs are right now, it's pretty clear that John Shaika isn't planning to make just one or two splashy moves and call it an off-season. Every report coming out of Toronto points to a front office that's trying to reshape this roster from top to bottom, and now the focus shifts to improving the forward group. According to NHL insider David Pagnotta, there are several names the Leafs could target once free agency opens, and while none of them solve every problem by themselves, each one fills a very specific need that this team has been missing. One of the first names mentioned is Boone Jenner, and I completely understand why Toronto would be interested. Pagnotta pointed out that Jenner projects as a third-line center, but also has the versatility to play on the wing whenever needed. More importantly, he emphasized that there really aren't any legitimate second-line centers available in free agency, meaning if the Leafs want to solve that particular issue, they'll probably have to do it through a trade instead. That makes a player like Jenner attractive because he strengthens your depth without forcing unrealistic expectations onto him. Then there's Mason Marchment, and honestly, this might be one of the more intriguing fits. You're talking about a player capable of scoring around 25 goals while bringing the kind of size and physical edge that playoff teams always seem to have. He can move between the second and third lines, contribute on the power play depending on the situation, and gives Toronto another player who isn't afraid to play a heavy style. After watching this team struggle to match the physical intensity of elite opponents over the years, it's easy to understand why someone like Marchment would appeal to this front office. Eeli Tolvanen offers something a little different. At just 27 years old, he still has room to grow, and Pagnotta believes his offensive game continues to improve. He isn't being viewed as a franchise-changing player, but rather as someone who can strengthen the middle six while offering skill, speed, and the possibility that another step forward is still coming. That's the kind of calculated gamble contenders often make, because if a player exceeds expectations, the value of the signing becomes enormous. What also caught my attention was the discussion about the fourth line. Pagnotta mentioned names like AJ Greer and Ryan Lomberg, not because they're offensive stars, but because they bring toughness, leadership, and a willingness to protect younger teammates. With Gavin McKenna now part of the organization after being selected first overall, adding veterans who can support young players both on and off the ice makes a lot of sense. Every successful team has those glue guys who help build the culture inside the locker room, and it sounds like Toronto understands that just as much as it understands the need for skill. Overall, I think this tells us that Shaika isn't simply searching for the biggest names available. He's looking for players who fit specific roles, improve the overall balance of the roster, and make the team deeper from top to bottom. Personally, I like that approach because we've seen plenty of talented Leafs teams over the years that still lacked the depth and identity needed to make a deep playoff run. But if you thought Toronto's attention was focused only on adding forwards, the next story takes this offseason to another level, because now the rumors aren't just about complementary pieces anymore. They're about the possibility of landing one of two former Norris Trophy winning defensemen, and if there's any truth to those reports, the Maple Leafs could be preparing for another blockbuster move. Now, this is where the conversation gets really interesting, because while Toronto is looking at adding more depth up front, there are also reports suggesting John Shaika isn't finished rebuilding the blue line either. In fact, two names that almost every hockey fan recognizes have suddenly entered the rumor mill, and we're talking about former Norris Trophy winners Roman Josi and Zach Werenski. At this point, these are still ideas being discussed rather than active negotiations, but the fact that respected insiders are connecting these players to Toronto tells you just how aggressive this front office is willing to be. Jeff Merrick was the first to raise the possibility of Roman Josi becoming available if Nashville decides it's finally time to fully embrace a rebuild. His point was simple: if the Predators are entering a new era under new management after missing the playoffs in consecutive seasons, does Josi really want to spend the final years of his prime waiting for another rebuild to succeed? Or would he rather join a team that believes it can compete immediately? That's a fascinating question, because even at 36 years old, Josi remains one of the smartest and most complete defensemen in the league. He brings elite puck movement, leadership, playoff experience, and the ability to control the pace of a game from the back end, which are qualities every contender values. At the same time, another rumor may be even more intriguing. Nick Kypreos floated the possibility of Toronto targeting Zach Werenski, and that immediately gets your attention, because we're talking about a defenseman who is 29 years old and still in the middle of his prime. Unlike Josi, who would represent more of a short-term veteran solution, Werenski could become the cornerstone of Toronto's defense for years to come. Of course, acquiring a player of that caliber would come with a massive price tag. Kypreos even suggested that a conversation could begin with Matthew Knies and Colorado's 2027 first-round pick, while also wondering whether Columbus might have interest in Morgan Riley or prospect Ben Danford as part of a larger package. Personally, that's where things become incredibly difficult as a Leafs fan. It's easy to dream about adding a player like Werenski because he would instantly elevate the defense and perfectly fit the age of the team's emerging core. But giving up someone like Matthew Knies is the type of decision that could define this organization for years. Knies has already shown he can be a foundational player, so unless Toronto is absolutely convinced that Werenski pushes them significantly closer to a Stanley Cup, that's a gamble that deserves very careful consideration. What stands out more than any individual rumor, though, is the philosophy behind all of this. John Chayka doesn't appear interested in making cosmetic changes or settling for minor upgrades. Every report suggests he's evaluating every position, exploring every opportunity, and looking for players who can genuinely reshape this roster rather than simply fill holes. Whether it's adding depth up front or pursuing elite talent on defense, the message coming from this front office is that standing still simply isn't an option. When you connect this story with everything we talked about earlier regarding Toronto's search for forward depth, one thing becomes crystal clear. This organization is attacking multiple weaknesses at the same time, instead of trying to solve just one problem. That's exactly what you'd expect from a management group that believes this team can return to Stanley Cup contention sooner rather than later. There's certainly risk involved, especially if blockbuster trades become necessary, but I'd much rather see an aggressive front office willing to chase meaningful improvements than one that's comfortable running back the same roster and hoping for different results. As a fan, I'm cautiously optimistic because this offseason finally feels different. There seems to be a clear plan, a willingness to make bold decisions, and an understanding that simply making the playoffs isn't enough anymore. Now it's about building a roster capable of competing with the very best teams in the NHL, and the next few weeks could completely reshape the future of this franchise. To me, what stands out most about these latest moves is that the Maple Leafs finally look like an organization with a clear direction instead of simply reacting to disappointment. Adding proven veterans like Sergei Bobrovsky while continuing to strengthen the depth of the roster shows that John Chayka isn't trying to win headlines. He's trying to build a team that can survive the grind of an 82-game season and still be at its best when the playoffs arrive. That's exactly what this franchise has been missing for years, and even though there are still questions to answer, it's hard not to feel like Toronto is laying the foundation for something much stronger than what we've seen in recent seasons. When you put today's two stories together, the message becomes pretty clear. The Leafs aren't sitting back and hoping last year's problems magically disappear. They're attacking multiple areas of the roster at once, bringing in championship experience, adding dependable depth, and trying to create the kind of competition that pushes everyone to be better. Whether every move works or not, the level of urgency coming from this front office is something I think every Leafs fan has been waiting to see. Now it's your turn. What do you think about everything that's happened over the last couple of days? Do you like the direction John Chayka is taking this team, or is there another move you still believe Toronto absolutely has to make before training camp? Let me know down in the comments because I read as many of them as I can, and I always enjoy hearing different opinions from fellow Leafs fans. And if you're enjoying the coverage and want to stay on top of every move, every rumor, and every big Leaf story throughout the offseason, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. We're getting incredibly close to 1,500 subscribers, and I'd really appreciate your help getting us there. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.